It is such a pleasure to welcome back to the program from Michigan's 11th Congressional District, Thaddeus McCotter. Congressman, I just wish we still had you to vote for in this presidential race because Romney's not my favorite.
Oh, that's all right, Lars. I hope that by the time the campaign moves forward, you'll be much more comfortable and able to vote for Mr. Romney.
Do you think I will be? I mean, this last week he announced that he's starting to slide his position on amnesty for illegal aliens slightly toward the left or the center, whichever you want to think it is. It sounds to me like, if anything, he's going to moderate even further as he heads toward the general rather than get more conservative, which is what a lot of us wish he'd do.
Well, I understand that. And as I always remind people, what we're looking at is a candidate of the party, and the preferences within the party pale in comparison when we look at each other than the ones that we see with the other parties, the Democrats.
Yeah, unfortunately, this is just one of those where we're going to... I mean, look, I've told people I will support the nominee because I don't think the country can take 4 more years of Barack Obama, nor a couple more Supreme Court justice choices by President Obama. But I don't know. It's a little tough, to take Romney. Plus, it's tough to figure out where he is on some of these issues because I know it's been a long campaign, but I'd like to hear where he stands on these. And this most recent warning about the amnesty issue and the illegal aliens and wanting to cater to the Latino voters is a real concern for me. I wanted to ask you though. You're in a state that suffered its share of unemployment problems, and you have one of the toughest unemployment rates in the country. But I'd like to know from you, what should we be thinking when we hear these new numbers coming out of the government that both say unemployment is dropping, but they also say the number of Americans working is dropping?
Well, I'm glad you asked, Lars. There's a piece of legislation, H.R. 4128. It's been introduced by my colleague Duncan Hunter, San Diego. And what it does is it tries to bring clarity to the actual unemployment situation in the United States. One of the things I think you and your listeners will appreciate about it, Lars, is it's all of one page.
Nice.
Which is a very good start.
Very nice.
Start. And what we say is, you hear there's an official unemployment number. It's technically called the U3 when it comes out. People listen to it and they get I believe, and Duncan believes, an inaccurate picture of employment in the United States. Because I think we've talked about before, one of the things that happens in Washington is logic ceases to exist. The way the current official unemployment rate is calculated, they stop counting people who get so discouraged that after 4 weeks they end their hunt for employment. Now what that means is that technically, if everyone in the United States lost their jobs and stopped looking for work, the unemployment rate would be 0.
Right.
Which is crazy. So what Duncan wants to do, and I want to do, and hopefully the House and Senate and the President want to do, is to get an accurate depiction of the employment situation by using the rate that includes those people who have been discouraged and aren't looking for work, the actual number of unemployed in the United States for whatever reason, and those who are on unemployment insurance. And we think that that's a very legitimate way for people to know the type of economic climate they find themselves in.
Would you see changing that in the, right now in real time and then, say, continuing to supply the old number along with a new number, or how would you go about that?
What Duncan's bill does is it doesn't do anything new. It just asks that when the Bureau of Labor Statistics puts the calculations out, is that that's referred to as the official unemployment number, that is what is put forward before the American people, because, again, it's a much more accurate representation of what's going on in the economy. Now, some people have tried to say that this is a partisan move. That's not true. It affects every single American, and I would think every single American would want to know what the actual unemployment rate is rather than however Washington has decided to put it forward, which underestimates the problem.
I wanted to ask you a few things about what's going on with the Obama administration right now. They had a pretty tough week last week. Not that I feel a lot of sympathy for the president, but from the outside, I know it all doesn't come back to his desk directly, but it just seems to smack of not managing the government, not being aware, and certainly not having people underneath you understanding that things have to be managed. That the General Services Administration can't be allowed to run wild, and the Secret Service has to pay attention to it, the way it represents America, and it. I guess this coming on top of a whole 3 years of watching Solyndra debacles and everything else, all of which seem to come back to nobody seems to know what they're doing, and and it creates problems when people don't pay attention to the job.
Well, I think you're right about the problems that it causes for the administration. In terms of the Secret Service scandal, the House and Senate, both Republicans and Democrats, taking a very good hard look at it. They're going to make sure that an institution that has well served the president in the past is held to account, but isn't also unfairly smeared by the
right.
a handful. In terms of the GSA, what you have to look at is the culture there, and not only the irony, but the culture there, that somehow that this was acceptable for the people who are supposed to help be fiscally responsible in the nation's capital with your money. In terms of the overall administration, look, this is the administration that passed that monstrosity called Obamacare. And will tell you that somehow government can run health care. And just look at the problems that are coming out now with institutions that have been in place for quite some time. I highly doubt that an administration that has problems with GSA or a problem with the Secret Service or other problems related to administration can speak with any credibility about how massive government can be when intruding into 1/6 of our economy.
Well, it does seem odd, though, that then to the, both the president and Governor Romney come out and say, but we have complete confidence in the Secret Service. Now, I don't know if they're just saying what you have to say politically, but it does seem a little odd when there seems to be a reason to doubt. And again, I don't want to see the whole agency smeared for the actions of a few agents. On the other hand, you had a couple of senior supervisors who, according to the reports, attempted to cover the problem up initially, and then of course it all came out and they weren't able to do that, and they've now it sounds like they're leaving the agency. But when people with that many years on the job try to cover it up and get caught doing it, does that suggest something deeper, or are we just looking at the aberrant actions of a dozen people?
Well, I think you're looking at how bureaucracy all too often, unfortunately, tends to try to protect itself and exacerbates the problem by not just dealing with the handful of culprits. They try to prevent the information from coming out, and we all know what happens. What is it again? The cover-up is worse many times than what actually happened. Maybe
no kidding.
But certainly, that's the axiom. Now, when you say that, I just remind people, especially the individuals who say that about the Secret Services, Reagan's dictum about trust but verify. You can have complete confidence in an organization, but you also have to make sure that trust is well placed.
No doubt. So what's next for you?
For me, just continue to serve the people in Michigan's 11th Congressional District. Every now and then, take a nice time to chat with somebody on the left coast.
Well, listen, I'm always glad to have you on the show, but I've told you that the reason you showed up in an awful lot of those films done by conservatives about the problems this country faces, especially the financial problems, is that I really think you are one of the more intelligent of the commentators on it, because like it or not, some of your colleagues are just not as tuned into the details as you are, including a whole bunch of them on the left side of the aisle.
Well, look, I like the people I work with sometimes, and sometimes I drive them crazy too. People are people. It's a representative government. Democracy's messy. But there's always a beauty in democracy, because every 2 years the people can have the peaceful revolution of the ballot box. And as nice as it is for you to say that about me, I'll show you the tweet stream and the Facebook posts of people who disagree.
Well, I mean, I'm talking about nitwits.
Sometimes.
I mean, people like Pelosi who come out and say, let's amend the First Amendment to give the government greater control over First Amendment free speech. And I think, there's just something fundamentally wrong with somebody who even thinks that's something we should even approach. The government should have more control over speech because you're unhappy with what people are saying about the way the government is operating right now. That's the last time you want to object to free speech. You should be celebrating it instead.
And you should be ever mindful of the fact, as Benjamin Franklin reminded us, look, we are public servants. We serve at the pleasure of the people with their consent. They can vote us in, vote us out. And as he once said about Congress, when they asked him, Mr. Franklin, how do you feel about leaving the Congress? He said, well, I will enjoy the promotion back to status of sovereign citizen. If you remember that, you'll be all right.
Congressman, it's a pleasure to have you on. I'm looking forward to getting to Michigan one of these days, and we appreciate you taking some time with the left coast.
We'd love to have you. Thanks.
Thanks. 17 after the hour.